Well, I guess we'll call this part two since that phone call I had to take cut off the other video. Which is ironic because it was literally about my son having an issue at the elementary school with his best friend, and now they're not best friends, they're enemies. Which is the topic I was actually discussing. And because this person, spoiler alert, became my enemy and best friend numerous times in the last 23 years. And also, ironically enough, that was a phone call from the school where I was just referring to the fact that for years of being her friend, while being infatuated with her, she was with a steady boyfriend who I met in elementary school, the very same school I just got a call from. And he was this weird kid who would like roll worms up into a little ball and swallow them whole like pills, but then in the middle of class would start gagging as they tried to crawl up his throat. So I would always tease her for dating the worm eater, but they were pretty steady there for years. They lived together. So I was her best friend for years. And then when I finally got an apartment, which ironically enough was across the street from their apartment, we started hanging out even more. We were just the best of friends. Soulmates, if you will. Literally. Always were. Still are. Always will be. We got closer and closer, and I'll never forget the day I saw... We saw Daredevil, as in the original Daredevil, as in my Daredevil. That'd be Ben Affleck. Yeah, I like that movie. Ben Affleck's Daredevil on the IMAX. And I'll never forget... while we were waiting for the movie to start, that was the moment I realized I was in love with her. I was in love with my best friend. It took me a while to tell her, but I had to because, those are feelings you can't keep bottled up inside. You have to express them. And I'll never forget the literal street, the location I was at while I was driving, while she was in the passenger seat, while we were on our way to my new apartment to hang out with my roommate, have some drinks, have some laughs. And I was turning from this street onto that street when I just blurted it out. Hey, I got something to tell you. I'm in love with you. She took it pretty cool. She might have been on and off with Joshua at the time. But eventually, she wasn't with him. Like, I would wait. I would wait for her. I would wait for her. I would wait for her. Spoiler alert, that's the whole decade of the 20s. In case you didn't catch part one, don't watch this. This is stuff about my life that no one should need to know or care about unless you really want to know and care about, and it's going to be very personal. I'm not going to hold anything back. Deal with it. I need this on record. So my 20s were obsessed with one woman. So I told her I loved her. Then one night on a full moon, she was hanging out. She moved away to Arizona, and then I was begging for her to come back. And one day she got in a horrible situation with her roommates there and called me while I was trying to see a movie, and I stepped outside of the movie, which I never do, to take a phone call. And my dream came true as she was like, I need to come back. And I was like, let me call my mom, we'll get you a bus ticket. Which I did. So I brought her back, thinking everything would be happily ever after, but it wasn't. Just for a while, she needed a place to live. I offered that she could stay at my place. My roommate wasn't having it, so he ended up moving out, so she ended up staying there. But we were in separate bedrooms, and one night during a full moon, we were very flirtatious, and she eventually just hollered down the hall, just do it. Very Shia LaBeouf. And I sprung out of bed, stormed down the hall, and aggressively grabbed and kissed her, and we had sex. The next day she was bragging to her friend about how endowed I was. True story. So for a while it was just we had a hookup, and we kind of moved on from that, but then that turned into maybe another hookup one day, another hookup one day. I got plenty of journals about my obsessions over her. I was in love with her for years and years and years. While she moved, while she came back, while she was with some guy, while she wasn't, while we lived together, while we didn't. Eventually we ended up dating. We dated for a while. Then after so many weeks of watching Lost together and enjoying so many fun times together, drinking 40s, roaming around the neighborhood, sharing stories, we were literal soulmates. One day we were walking down the street where her parents still live, the same street I go down every single day to walk my son to and from school. My son will end up, he goes to the same elementary school that, Joshua went to, and one day he's going to go to the same high school where her and I met. Anyway, um, she just blurts out, we should get married. It was her idea. We should get married. Great idea. I always wanted to marry her. That was always my dream, is just to have a wife and a family, raise a kid. That's all I ever wanted. I could care less where I worked. Then her mom planned the wedding. Her parents paid for it. It wasn't anything fancy schmancy, but it was a great day. We got married. And everything. Oh, before we got married, though, while we were together, she lost her job, had a horrific night, and she was living in an apartment where I would stay all the time, like I would stay the night all the time. We were together. But that night in particular, her neighbors, young boys, were having a party, and she had just gotten fired. And I wanted to stay there to comfort her, but she was like, no, just go home. Just go home. I'd rather be alone right now, is what she kept telling me. I'd rather be alone, just go home. I'm not feeling very well. So I did. Came back the next morning with a dozen roses. This is very Tommy Wiseau, The Room. To give her these roses, and I felt something was off. And I felt bad for her losing her job. Oh, she was working with her dad, by the way. Cleaning a church. We smoked in that church. Like, I convinced her to vacuum that church topless as a fetish of mine. Not completely. She stayed in her bra, but still. Anyway, if you ever see my Monty Python Meaning of Life video, which is part of one of my movie ones, that's what I'm talking about, when she worked at that church. Anyway, but she got fired from her dad. And for the record, almost every single woman I've ever been with has been sexually abused by a family member. That's pretty messed up. Her dad fired her. She was turmoil. I found out the next day. She calls me, and her friend convinced her that she had to tell me. That night when she told me to leave, that she wanted to be alone and her neighbors were having a party, she slept with one of her neighbors. Transferred a temporary, curable STD to me that she claimed to never have and couldn't have gotten it from me, and supposedly the doctor might have been jumping the gun, and that's not really what it was. But I took the meds and it went away, whatever it was, if it was. But if it was, I got it from her, from him, from that. I showed up with roses the night after she cheated on me. Did I leave? Nope. It's too loyal. I stayed with her. We got married. It was a good year. Eventually, she got sick of me not having as much of a sexual drive as her. I didn't get that till my 30s. In my 20s, I wasn't that interested. But boy, was she. And all she wanted to do was go out and be social and go to clubs and stuff. I didn't, so I stayed at home, watched C-Lab, played video games. What do you want from me? Little did I know that while I wasn't going out with her, she was going out with others. And eventually, we both worked at Red Lobster at the same time. And she eventually started sleeping with one of the cooks there. Filthy, nasty guy. Followed her to a hockey game once and ended up leaving when she got kicked out for being too drunk, just because that guy took her to the game and I happened to get tickets to that game. I was still obsessed with a woman who betrayed me twice. There would be another. There would be a third. After she finally decided to leave the guy she was having an affair with, I guess, and I didn't leave her. We stayed married, we moved on from it, and eventually she had another affair. But this time, as I couldn't take the pain anymore, but still didn't have the cojones to leave her, I made her choose. Him or me. Oh, she chose him. She chose him real quick. Her and I got into many fights. She was very abusive to me. She would be a very angry, abusive, physical, fighting drunk. And she would always drink too much, and often she would hit me a lot, scratch my neck. I would have to tell people at work it was my cat. We've had the cops called on us a few times. Eventually, I defend myself. I don't care who you are. I'll let you hit me without fighting back. I'm actually a pacifist. But you can only hit me so many times before I'm going to defend myself. So there was a couple of times when I hit back. Not like hit, but fought back. Of course, one of those times happened to be as soon as the cops could see us through the window, where I'm literally defending myself, and they just assumed that I was abusing her and believed her belligerent drunk story after coming home from the bar, and I was completely sober telling the truth while she was lying and couldn't even remember how she got home. They arrested us both because she was so stupid that she ended up throwing our weed in their face. Thanks a lot. Couldn't even come home to that when I got out. We both had to take domestic violence stuff, and that domestic violence BS has followed me to the end of my days. But it was all her. It was all her fault. Sure, yes, I was involved. Don't get me wrong, but not like that. I was still 75, if not 95% the victim. So eventually she left me for this other guy. But we got into a fight once that got physical. She hurt me. I inadvertently hurt her. A friend of ours who was Joshua's best friend from back in the day, who was our both mutual best friend when she was with Joshua. Years later, she's now friends with him. He finds out about our scuffle, blames me. How dare he hurt you? Her drunk ass tells him, because this was after she moved out of where we lived together while we were still married. So it was the guy she left me for and their best friend, who was the best friend from the past of her ex-boyfriend. She tells them where I live. That's a whole nother story. But long story short, I was working at a liquor store and I had a warrant out, and the manager of the liquor store, when we were closing, accidentally put the code in wrong and was afraid that the cops were going to show up. And I was like, dude, I got a warrant. If the cops show up, I'm going to jail. So he had me hide in the cooler. I was all freaked out, paranoid. Cops never came. He said, you're good. Get out of here. I go home. I lived right down the street. And shortly after I got home, sat on my couch, popped open a beer, turned on the TV. Bang, bang, bang at the door. I thought it was the cops. Immediately after the bang, 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 the door started getting kicked open. And I'm like, wow, that's some aggressive cops. It wasn't the cops. It was those two men. The one she left me for, Shane, and the one who used to be our best friend a decade earlier, James. And they kicked open my door. And Shane grabbed my beer, it's very nice of him, out of my hand, and set it down on the counter. And they proceeded to beat the shit out of me within an inch of my life. I was a pacifist and had hardly ever been in a fight in my life. And this was a big guy who a decade earlier got arrested and put in the back of a cop car and kicked out that cop car window with his bare feet. This guy was no joke. And he was punching and kicking me. So I curled into a little ball and cried and begged for them to stop. I didn't know what was going on. I was paranoid about being arrested not 30 minutes earlier. And here I was getting the snot kicked out of me by two people, one of whom I've never met before, and the other one wondering what the heck was going on. I almost blacked out when he stomped on my head. And then when they left, I called my brother and friends and asked them to come help me. My face was so swollen. I was so beaten. I could have died that night. My door was broken. So I didn't want to stay there anymore, so I stayed somewhere else for a while. I had to take some pictures. I couldn't work for a week because my face was so swollen. She felt bad, I guess, eventually. Tried to give me a note about her sorries. I didn't know they would do that, but why the hell would you tell them our address? Apparently, to this day, he feels bad. Oh, there's a reason I know that. So we had a falling out. We got divorced, and she moved away with the guy Shane, who I then found out impregnated her, and that devastated me because all I ever wanted was a family, a child, and my soulmate, the love of my life, Amanda. I wanted to have a baby with her. She didn't want kids. Next thing I know, she leaves me for this guy and gets pregnant. I felt like my life had been stolen. And there I was alone. So I dated other people, had other experiences. One of them with severe genital warts, and I helped her by putting on that cream on her anus. She still cheated on me. I've been cheated on many times and never left the woman for it. That's how much of a POS I am. That's how loyal I am. One of the great examples why I don't believe in relationships and will never be in one again. I'm happy now, and one of those reasons is because I'm single and have been for almost a decade. The last person I was with was my son's mother. I'll cover that in my 30s, because most of my 20s was Amanda related. And then there was the rebound, which was Lillian, who I kind of sort of slept with, just the tip, just to see how it felt. I don't know if that counts. She was a great cook. There was Megan, who cheated on me with numerous men that I found out numerous times, and she was a severe alcoholic. Someone who, instead of keeping water on their bedside table, she kept shots of vodka, and first thing in the morning would shoot shots of vodka, and I never saw her not drinking vodka. That was a good time. Plenty of good times, but also plenty of terrible times where she would just black out and kick me out of her house randomly. Yeah, those were fun days. And I met her with my oldest brother, Mark, and we kind of discussed, hey, I'm interested in her. And he went, yeah, that's fine, go for it. So I dated her for a while. And then when her and I broke up, I found out that then he dated her. My oldest brother hooked up with my ex-girlfriend. That's not just gross, but the worst possible betrayal. I would never want to be with my brother's ex, and I would never do that to my brother. I didn't find out till after the fact, so it's not even like he asked me for the okay. And then when I was with Nicole and she kicked me out, I was staying with my brother, and then Megan broke up with him and he got so mad about it that he kicked me out, sucker punched me in the back of the head, threw me out of his apartment in the middle of the night. Never really forgave him for that. He also tried to kiss my wife Amanda at one time while we were married. He was a drunk too. So Amanda had a kid. After Megan, I met Nicole. I never got over the fact that Amanda had a kid without me until Nicole got pregnant. But that's a whole other story. I guess I should just cover all the Nicole stuff later. But eventually Amanda called me when she found out I was having a kid. We did keep in touch when I was with Nicole. Nicole took that as a emotional cheating, betrayal. I just stayed in touch with Amanda. She did send me a couple of pictures a couple of times. I don't have them anymore. I had a couple of great pictures of Megan too. But Nicole made me delete those. And as a sign of trust, I did that so that she would trust me and I could be completely devoted to her. That didn't get me anywhere. Nothing but a psychotic baby mama. That's a whole nother story. But my marriage didn't turn out too great. I was married for 3 years and 11 months, officially. Divorce papers, I had a co-worker at the time who was a notary. So they officially notarized my paperwork when I signed it, although their notary expired like a month before. So technically it was forged, which meant technically we weren't really divorced, but whatever, it was filed. But eventually, after a couple of years, like I said, we're soulmates, we started up a friendship again. She moved away, she moved back. I'm supposed to sit in on my son's appointment now. Yeah. We got friendly again, had our separate lives with our separate spouses and separate kids. She eventually left Shane, my ex-wife, and then got with a new man. And then when she moved back to Colorado, I still had it in my mind, sweet, now we'll get back together. But I'll give it a month. She just got back. I'll give it a month. It's not like she's going to hook up with someone in that month. Next thing I know, she hooked up with someone and was nervous to tell me who. Because it was James. The two men who almost killed me and invaded my home. One of them being the guy she was with who would then have a baby with. Then she left him, moved back to Colorado, and got with the other guy, James. friend of ours from the teenage years who stomped on my head. And I thought, well, it's not like they'll be together forever. They got married. Had kids. They're still married. And I still, to this day, 23 years after having met her and having gone through all of that with her, we're still best friends. Sometimes we fight and don't talk for months. Sometimes we talk on a daily basis. But we're still soulmates, best friends. And she's still with the guy who almost killed me. And now that I've been free from relationships and all the nonsense, which I'll discuss in a future video of why I feel the way I do and how disgusting they are. It's not from my personal experience, spoiler alert. It's from hearing everyone else around me constantly complain about everything that comes with being in a relationship. I'm happy because I'm alone. But even though I've been happy and alone for 8 years, I've spent those 8 years listening to my best friend bitch about her marriage. Oh, and yeah, she cheated on him too. Not with me. Well, she did make out with me once while she was married to him. This was maybe 4 years ago or so? 5 years ago? Something like that. And then again, I got in my head, oh, I'm gonna... I was still in love with her until literally like 2 years ago. When I finally went, you know what, I'm just in love with the idea of her, and moved on. But I was so stupid and naive. Thank goodness I eventually turned 35 and grew the hell up. I can't wait to be 40, because now I'm finally starting to be smart. So yeah, most of my 20s were devoted to this woman who did very horrid things to me, and I put up with and changed me as a person to who I am now, and she's still my best friend that calls me in the middle of the night during her drunken fights with her husband. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Thank God I didn't marry my baby mama, Nicole. We'll go over her crazy ass next time. But thank God I didn't have kids with my ex-wife. She's not the kind of mother I would want my kid to have. And boy, if we were still married, I would be miserable. We would still argue. She still drinks. She still fights. She still cheats. I'm good as the friend, but as the friend, all I get to hear about is her bitching about her marriage and her husband, who almost killed me. Funny how the world works, right? You can't make this stuff up. Life is stranger than fiction. People keep telling me, you could write a book. I could write a lot of books and make a lot of movies, which is why the least I can do is these videos that are barely scratching the surface and not nearly covering the hours and hours and hours it would take to go over all the details and all the stuff that happened along the way and in between. But eventually in my late 20s, I met a young girl named Nicole, literally right after I said, I will never again pursue a woman. A woman's gonna have to pursue me. That's what she did, at a very vulnerable point. It led to the greatest thing in my life, but it also resulted in what is still the most horrendous nightmare every day. Anywho, see you next time when we'll go over my 30s, which is just as fun as this video, only a different woman. But this time I'll have a son, and he's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I love you, Flynn. Flynn lives. Okie dokie.